This is going to sound crazy, but we might already have the best phone of 2025, and it might be a model that costs less than $1,000.
I beg your pardon?
It might seem like an exaggeration, but hear me out, because I'm having a hard time seeing how anyone else is going to be able to deliver something as good as the OnePlus 13 for anywhere near its $899 starting price. That's kind of amazing, but as a long-time OnePlus follower, I've witnessed the rebirth of the brand that began with the OnePlus 11 a couple of years ago, and has only seen it go from strength to strength since then. The 13 feels like the culmination of that journey, and it's also a warning shot to the likes of Samsung as it prepares what seems to be another year of pretty iterative Galaxy updates. I've had this phone for around a month and a half at the time this video is going out, so it's time to jump into why the OnePlus 13 could be the best phone of 2025 already, and also some thoughts on why it still might not be for you personally. Let's get into it. Firstly, this is a flagship phone that sells for just a hair under $900 in the US. That's not cheap, but it's also a tier below your tip-top Ultras and Pro Maxes. And given that price tag, OnePlus is giving you a phenomenal bang for your buck. You've got the Snapdragon 8 Elite at the heart of this phone, the Apple-beating SoC that'll power every big-name Android device this year. The base model usually comes with 12 gigs of RAM and 256 storage, but at the time of talking, OnePlus is running a promo where you can get the upgraded 16 plus 512 version for the same price. That's the model I've been testing here. And if you can get in on that deal, it's exceptional value for money, especially considering most big brands will still only give you 128 gigs of storage at that sub $1,000 mark. Performance and benchmarking wise, no surprise the OnePlus 13 crushes it just as much as any other 8 Elite phone I've tested, with the obvious caveat that it's not a gaming phone, so it will throttle back somewhat over time. You can see that in the likes of 3D Mark here. But arguably much more impressive is the sheer bonkers level of battery life that I'm able to get from this phone over the past month and a half. It's in line with what I've gotten out of its sister phone, the Oppo Find X8 Pro. That device uses a slightly weaker MediaTek Dimensity chip with an ever so slightly smaller battery cell. But the 6,000 mAh battery in the OnePlus 13 is way beyond anything we've seen in anything approaching a normal sized Android phone. The company is using silicon carbon technology to pack that extra juice in, 20% more power than your typical Android flagship, in a device that still feels not excessively hefty. With that said, OnePlus absolutely delivers on the promise of a big battery and all-new, all-efficient silicon from Qualcomm. This is easily a multi-day phone, and I really can't imagine what kind of use you'd have to throw at it to be able to kill it off before bedtime. It's an absolute longevity monster. Add to that OnePlus's trademark super quick charging, 100 watts wired in most countries, 80 in the US, plus 50 watt wireless, and you're pretty much guaranteed to be free from battery anxiety. I guess it's worth throwing in a sort of mini critique here when we're talking about the charging situation with this phone. There's no charger in the box anymore, unfortunately, so you'll need to shell out for OnePlus's fancy 100 watt charger on top of the price of this phone if you want to take full advantage of it. And the optional MagSafe-like magnetic charging attachment that's also sold separately, I really don't see the point of it, to be honest. You need to buy a supporting case to use it with the magnets so they'll adhere properly. The built-in fan is noisy, you can't lay it flat, it's just kind of bad. So I've made no secret in the past of the fact that I wasn't a huge fan of the OnePlus 11 and OnePlus 12 design language. The weird off-center camera bulge, the bulbous curved edge displays, and generally chunky proportions, to say nothing of the bathroom tile aesthetic of those patterned back panels. Some of those things have returned in the OnePlus 13, but in my opinion, this is just a classier and more subdued take on that previous OnePlus design language. The new vegan leather blue colorway looks sharp, but even the standard black model I'm using here looks sophisticated and understated. There's a similar soft-touch sandstone glass texture we've seen from earlier OnePlus flagships, complemented by a subtle wood grain effect that I was initially a bit reticent to see, but which has definitely grown on me over time. Otherwise, the flattened sidewalls make this phone easier to hold onto than some other curvy handsets like Oppo's X8 Pro, but it does inherit one thing I really loved about that Oppo device, and that's the flat display. The edges of the glass are subtly curved on all four sides, contributing to the nice symmetrical feel that you get. And fingers crossed, it should also mean you'll have an easier time finding a decent screen protector. I also want to call out OnePlus's excellent haptics once again. Vibration feedback is a huge part of what makes a phone feel like a high-quality piece of equipment, and OnePlus inherits all the work done on the Oppo side with devices like the Find X8 Pro through O Haptics, giving sharp, customizable haptic feedback. I was kind of lukewarm on last year's OnePlus 12 camera system. It wasn't exactly bad, especially not the primary, but lingering issues around contrast and exposure with the telephoto in particular meant that for me it was easily outshone by a lot of other 2024 flagships. Thankfully, 2025 sees some significant upgrades across the board, bringing a new triple 50-megapixel camera setup to the OnePlus 13, which may seem familiar if you've watched our review of the Oppo Find X8 Pro. That's because this camera setup is basically 75% of what you get with the current Oppo flagship, the primary ultra-wide and 3x telephoto from that model, only without the added gravy of the 6x super telephoto. On one hand, that's kind of a shame to see because I love that 6x camera on the Oppo device, but at the same time, for 90% of shots you're going to be taking, you'd likely have been using the other three anyway. The primary, with its 1.43-inch sensor size, isn't the largest among its contemporaries, but it's paired with an f/1.6 lens that serves to compensate and remains excellent in low-light photography regardless, while also allowing for some beautifully soft bokeh in closer-up images. It's an excellent, reliable primary shooter that I never felt underpowered compared to, say, a Pixel 9 Pro or S24 Ultra. And in fact, compared to the Samsung camera in particular, I felt like the OnePlus 13 did a better job in shots with a bit of motion where perhaps the subject isn't standing perfectly still. That's also helped along by OnePlus's fantastic burst shooting mode, which can capture up to 50 shots in full resolution in quick succession at 7 frames per second. If I was to nitpick, I'd say in some of these shots you do see a little HDR haloing, and perhaps OnePlus is a touch heavier with the sharpening effect than I'd ideally like to see, but unless you're going into a 1:1 crop on a large display, this isn't something you're going to notice. The new 50-megapixel ultra-wide is a very welcome upgrade from last year, and in these sample images in a high-contrast scene looking out over the water here, you can see a much wider field of view than earlier OnePlus cameras, and without the distortion that you see around the edges of the frame, even in some flagships. In daylight, this gives you the much more dramatic field of view you expect from an ultra-wide shooter with fewer compromises than ever, though again, a little haloing and sharpening can be seen as with the primary. And if you look closely at this side-by-side, you can see some subtle color differences as well versus the shot from the primary. And combined with OnePlus's night mode, the strengths of this ultra-wide also translate over pretty well to low-light captures. Having a decently large telephoto is also a boon for the OnePlus 13, and this new 3x tele is a massive improvement over the OnePlus 12s, despite the relatively small on-paper differences. Although the output is definitely a little on the softer side compared to the other two lenses, even at its native 3x, it's by far a more usable telephoto than any previous OnePlus camera, and across a wider range of lighting conditions to boot. Obviously, you're lacking the 6x super telephoto of the Oppo camera, but in lower light conditions, Oppo tended to switch down to a crop of the 3x anyway, and in longer zoom shots you can still get decent looking photos up to around the 30x level. Although beware, because a lot of AI powered enhancement does tend to kick in after around the 20x mark that can make things look a little over smooth and unnatural. And over on the video side, it's largely a repeat performance of the Find X8 Pro, a very capable video performer, though the biggest things you're going to be missing out on from more expensive flagships like the Pixel 9 Pro and iPhone 16 Pro are the more advanced video shooting modes, for example, the Pixel's excellent AI-powered video boost feature or the iPhone's ProRes log support. The biggest change to the feel of the OnePlus 13, I think, has to do with its software. For the past few years, the company seemed to be coasting along with its own flavor of Oppo's ColorOS plus a few minor visual tweaks. And it is still kind of doing that, but the difference now is that underlying UI from Oppo is vastly improved. The animation system has been overhauled for smoother operation, and the subtle little flourishes that accompany actions like switching apps or pushing an app up into a window or even just unlocking the phone make for a much more polished experience than you'll have seen from any earlier version of OxygenOS. Add in some comprehensive tweaks that you can make to the way your home screen looks, feels, and animates, and some pretty slick looking stock wallpapers as well, and you've got one of the best looking Android skins of the moment, in my opinion. Although I'm dubious as to the value of many AI features that have been shoehorned into other modern smartphones, OnePlus's are fairly thoughtful and easy to ignore if they're not your cup of tea. Google Gemini is your default assistant out of the box, and there's an on-device AI search feature designed by OnePlus that can make all your local files searchable via prompts. This is mostly for on-device files though, which isn't really the way I use my phones. But for my money, the most interesting and valuable AI features have to do with photography, many of which take heavy inspiration from features we've seen in Google's Pixel phones over the years. AI Unblur, first seen on the Pixel 7, is here and works as expected, and same for AI Detail Enhance, which apes the Pixel 9 Pro's zoom enhance capability to conjure AI-imagined details into cropped shots. There's also the AI Reflection Eraser, which you might remember from the Oppo Find X8 Pro, great for airplane window photos. So through this combination of slick visuals and animations, mostly gimmick-free AI features, and a general level of polish that we haven't always seen from OnePlus in the past, this is a bright lens through which to experience Android 15. So why would you not pick up the OnePlus 13? I think it's fair to say some phones like Google's Pixel 9 Pro or the S24 Ultra on the Samsung side can take better telephoto shots. I already mentioned Google and Apple's strength with video recording as well. While the 13 definitely is not a bad video camera, if that's a major focus for you, there are better alternatives available. Same too with the ecosystem and AI. Apple is obviously the king of ecosystem and ecosystem lock-in, and it's built in AI much more thoroughly throughout the entire OS with Apple Intelligence. And Google is building out a really impressive suite of connected products with everything from its Pixel Watch to Nest Home devices. And while OnePlus will support its phones with Android updates for 4 years, there are questions around how quickly those will arrive as this phone starts to age. But on the other hand, with OnePlus you are getting leading specs, especially with those early bird deals, with camera capabilities that really nip at the heels of Google and Samsung, plus exceptional battery life and quick charging capabilities for less than $900. And with that in mind, OnePlus really does seem to have something of a Goldilocks product on its hand here. More than enough smartphone power for most people, exceptionally competitive in many areas, and priced to move. So if you're tempted by the OnePlus 13, or maybe you've already ordered one, then let me know in the comments what you're looking forward to the most. Share your thoughts down there and subscribe for more upcoming 2025 flagships coming very soon. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.